folks, we will get started and hopefully Martin will be able to join us shortly. So thank you for joining this webinar brought to you by inai. Over the next 30 to 45 minutes, we're going to delve into the strategies to optimize authorization rates for airlines. We will have a Q&A at the end, but please feel free to ask the panel any questions in the chat tab, and if appropriate, we'll ask them as we go along. Otherwise, we'll keep them for the end. Stay tuned at the end for a link to access a free trial that will unlock the potential for your payments data and provide you with intelligence and recommendations for optimization. By next year, the airline industry is expected to fully recover to pre-pandemic passenger levels. As the industry continues to grow, so too does the customer expectation for a seamless payment experience. With this, of course, comes the need for airlines to offer a broad range of payment options, manage multiple processes, and drive payment optimization. So I want to thank you for joining us as we delve into some of these strategies with our expert panel. Well, we have one of them at least at this point. But I would like to take this opportunity to thank and welcome Mohammed Hafiz to the panel. Mo has, thank you, Mo. It's great to have you with us. We're very privileged to have you with us. Mo is currently the Chief FinTech Officer at AirAsia Super App, and prior to this was Head of Payments at Financial Services at AirAsia. Mo's also held senior regional roles with Visa, MasterCard and Citibank, spanning a 30-year career at the forefront of payments for both the scheme and merchant perspective. So thank you for joining us, Mo. We're very pleased and privileged to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I think we have Martin as well.
Do we have Martin? Is he?
Sorry for the delay.
Yes, we do. There you go.
Hello. Sorry, guys.
Fantastic.
Good.
Hello, Martin.
Hey, Martin. How are you?
Very pleased to have you here.
Hi, Mike. Good to see you. Sorry for the delay, guys. Some IT issues over here, but happy to be here.
Let me introduce you, Martin, for the rest of the audience. So Martin Royers, great to have you here. Better late than never. Since 2022, Martin has been an independent payment consultant and founder of Payments Taking Off. Prior to this, Martin spent over 30 years at KLM as Director of Customer Payments, and he was also responsible for KLM and Air France's payment strategy. And Martin was involved in the setting up of KLM's in-house payment engine back in 2008. So Martin, thank you for jumping on and joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I realize I haven't given a full introduction to myself. It's about the other two guys, but just so you know who is your host today. My name is Mike Evanett. I'm Head of Sales for inai, and we are a global payments orchestration and a payments intelligence business. The latter being a standalone product that requires no code, provides merchants with insights into the performance of their payment stack, with the goal to optimize, increase auth rates, and reduce costs while offering fee insights. And I will share a little bit of that right at the end with you guys, but I am delighted to be your host today. So now that we started a little bit late, let's get straight into things. Gentlemen, the airline industry, as we know, it's a complex one, saddled with legacy systems and consolidated acquisitions over the years, not to mention the complexities of a truly global industry and localized passenger requirements, of course. Just Martin, coming to you, give you no rest. You've been in the airline payment industry for over 30 years. Can you tell us some of the unique payment challenges that you've seen and you've faced, and maybe how KLM dealt with them, please?
Okay, and we only have 45 minutes, huh, Mike?
I was about to say the same. It's something we can go all night with.
Oh, okay, but let me just mention too. There are many, of course, but if we focus on online, even just in the digital sales channel, an airline has many platforms or customer touchpoints, if you like, and preferably wants to offer a consistent payment offering to its clients. But not all payment options are available, nor can be offered on any platform or for any transaction. Think of the difference between payment options on your website, a booking tool, internet check-in, and compare that what you can offer on your kiosk or at the airport and sells on board. That's even next level, taking into account connectivity issues. So there you have to find the right balance. And also take into account this flexibility is largely dependent on how payment and IT is organized in your airline, in your company. Do you have your own booking tool and payment engine, or are you dependent on third parties? And if the latter, what does that mean for you offering and your flexibility in growing payment options and conversion? And if I can add another thing, but maybe we will get there later, risk, especially on the acquiring side, is very important. But let me leave that for later.
No, it's a great point, and we know that the risk and the risk appetite of acquirers is important, but I do think we will come to that in a moment. Thank you, Martin. Mo, anything you can add to this? You've managed both an airline and a super app business. How different are the payment experiences across the two, and how have you managed those?
Well, definitely what Martin is saying is definitely true. One of the things is we are all trying in the payment space to bring the airline to the newer generation space on how business is being done. A lot of the airlines, doesn't matter how young, tend to do it traditionally, the legacy method. They will have your face-to-face channels and your very typical web channels at best. Right now, as we see a mobile-first environment, that's also an additional channel. And I like the fact that Martin speaks to the converted here, where the consumer needs to have a very consistent consumer experience right out, right? Because it's all about the customer and the experience with the airline. It's not so much about the payment. The challenge we have, and this is going to be unique, I don't think it's going to be unique. It's going to be unique in every country that the airline works in, is doesn't matter what we put up front, we're still going to be dependent on the banks that support it. And the banks don't actually upgrade their infrastructure as quickly, which gives a big headache to people like me and Martin, because the business wants a unified payment experience because they want to hide it, they want to make it disappear, right? And not all acquirers basically have the capability, and inevitably banks being banks, they basically just give you what they have. And not many banks are willing to sit down and progressively give you all the new shiny objects. So the complexity that us supporting the airlines, and for me became very real, was the fact that you go from a traditional business with a defined points of contact with the customer, face-to-face kiosks, as Martin mentioned, to a mobile-first environment. The only hybrid would be the web for the two, because that's as far as the airline will go. That's not even going into the in-flight experience yet, and the contactless experience yet, and the offline pieces yet, and all the batch process with the travel agents yet, right?
That's next level, Mo.
Yeah, I know, but all of that is stuff that we will have to manage, right? And actually what we forget is we solution the front, but I think we're very dependent on the infrastructure, the legacy support that the banks provide that we have to build around, right? And I don't see any progressive singular support as yet. We've had to sit down and work with multi-acquirers in multi-markets. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So then comes the fraud piece, right, Martin? It differs in different market. It differs in different touch points, as well as different customer bases as well. So there's so many. That's why I like the way Martin opened. Do we only have 45 minutes, or is it going to be a full evening?
We'll have part two, I think, another time.
And Mike, if I may add, because what I clearly see as a big challenge, coming back to your question, especially after COVID, is that the whole landscape kind of changed. Whereas in the past for airlines, I would say acquirers were queuing up to win their business. And most of the airlines were in the driver's seat, and of course, depending on the balance sheet, they could strike a good deal. But COVID shook the whole world up, and it's quite different now. And obviously, it's still very much depending on the risk appetite of any acquirer, PSP or bank out there, financial party. But the landscape changed, and so that's why I think it's important that airlines really look at their payment strategy. They should do that always, actually, but especially now towards acquiring. if I look at the risk come from two sides. First of all, airlines obviously do not want to put all their eggs in one basket, so should not work just with one acquirer. Hence, why connectivity is so important. Airlines should be able to reach out to multiple acquirers in order to spread their risk, and also in case of any technical issues, so for the failover. But also, and that's what I meant with after post-COVID, is that many acquirers have become quite prudent, and depending on their risk department, are only willing to take up so much risk of an airline, given the perceived. Sometimes it's perceived, but also sometimes it's real risk which comes along with the fact that a service is still to be consumed, whereas the payment has taken place already. And then in case of any bankruptcy, it's obviously the acquirer who is the last resort, and that's where there can be some kind of tension.
Yeah, it's always
Absolutely.
been unsecured line of credit, right, Martin? So they're always the last to sit down and get anything.
Correct. Yeah.
And it also plays into the fact of a multi-acquirer model, not least for the risk, but as we obviously appreciate the routing capability as well to have, and the failover capability to have that multi-acquirer model, driven a lot by the risk, but that has also given the ability for the airlines to be able to route their transactions accordingly as well.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
I agree. But that's also, I mean, Mike, when you look at that, that's assuming you do a singular line of business, and that's basically selling tickets. When you start adding the stuff that the airlines do in terms of add-ons, ancillaries, and all the other stuff, that gets complex already. And then once you start looking at generating more revenue through in-flight sales, it actually creates all sorts of issues when it comes to the consistency of the payment type, the monitoring, the profiling of the customer, transaction types, use cases, the settlement, and so forth, right? So the airline industry, as we see it today, is almost required to orchestrate, because there's just no way to do it the same old way, because it's never going to work. There's no one formula for every line of business that they want to sit down and secure that revenue.
Absolutely. Great insight, Mo. Thank you. That leads us actually quite nicely as a segue onto the next point. I guess the payment process then, as you sort of just alluded to, it's a huge part of the travel booking experience. I was doing some research looking at the UATP. Nearly 30% of travelers will actually stop the checkout process and move to another airline if their preferred payment method isn't available. And as you talk about, there's the ongoing experience of additional add-ons, the in-flight experience as well. And this also leads to localized and even nuanced browsing and buying habits. Just to give you a couple of examples that we've seen there, as we know, in Germany, 30% of travelers, they prefer to use mobile wallets. In Latin America, installments is really taking off. And then we think about nuanced buying, for example. The Indian market, over 50% of the population like to pay via a mobile app, yet conversely, take us Brits in the UK, over 70% of us want to use our desktop browsing for buying airline tickets. And this is something that when you're responsible for the payment side of an airline, you've got to manage this. So the point I'm making is consumers expect to pay how they want to. The process of booking and paying needs to be optimized to make it easy, frictionless, and secure. So Mo, what are the latest trends you're seeing, and how do you adapt efficiently when you're managing these?
Well, the thing is this, I mean, Tony has a very different view around customer experience, and he kind of influences the payment experience as well. So the mandate we got on the inside is he basically wants payments to disappear, because he just wants the customer to focus on the experience of actually buying the ticket and consuming it. So the challenge with that, actually, for me, is actually a great one, because then it allows us to sit down and embed the payment experience right through, which changes a lot of the typical paradigms of when payment is made. We no longer just take payments at the back during a final checkout. We allow for payments to be paid ad hoc. It gives the finance guys a little bit more of a headache, because the sale is being done throughout the journey versus just at the final one. But it allows us to, as you can see in terms of what we're talking about, reduce the decline rates. The acceptance levels go up because actually they buy when they actually want to buy instead of having to wait. But one of the things that we realize is this: having managed the airline as well as the online OTA, the super app, the payment portfolio is very different. On the airline side, we actually have long haul and short haul flights. The long haul flights is heavy cards, and second to that would be direct debit. When I say direct debit, it's actually internet banking in the normal sense, because people actually pay right through. On the short haul flights, we see a stronger advent for direct debit, and cards drop all the way down to about 4 or 5. And we have e-wallets as a more frequent flight, because the short haul flights are more domestic flights. Their ticket sizes are within the typical 100, 250 region, not the thousands. So they don't think they need that level of protection as much as we think. And they're just willing to sit down and do a direct debit hit, right? But on the super app, because it's mobile first, that environment totally flips. It's all about e-wallet and QRs and direct debit first. Yep. And even if we see cards, it's actually stored card, because we will make it seamless. So we've got a headache because the payment management and monitoring and everything else varies, because Mike, you would come in from, say, the UK into KL, and you'd be doing the long haul, you buy with the card. But then when you want to do KL to Langkawi for a little short hop, you'll be using something else. And then you'll be walking around with your app, and when you want to sit down and book that ride, you'll be using something else. So the problem about profiling is all way off, because it's still Mike. You immediately use 3 different payment types, right? So
absolutely.
Right, so it's a different spin, and my cybersec guys are basically cracking their heads, because whatever they try and do in terms of profiling doesn't seem to work anymore, because now you're extending the consumption period. The same customer is consuming your services throughout a longer period in different personas at different stages, and they've never thought about that before.
Fascinating insight. Go on, Martin. Sorry.
Sorry, Mike. Sorry to interrupt you. I really second that what Mo just elaborated on, and if I may add, what I really learned during my time at KLM when I was heading the payments team over there. I mean, I always say payment is culture, and that's what Mo is saying as well. Just like the culture is different in any country or part of the world, that is reflected in the way people pay or want to pay, and. And also basically how we pay it for goods and service, it's often a matter of habit, conditioning, and familiarity. Please take that into account. So for a merchant, understanding and tapping into the local payment culture is essential. Offering a right set of payment options is crucial to boost conversion, and don't miss out on sales or even cart abandonment. An airline should take into account, and don't forget that their direct channel is for them often the most preferred sales channel, taking into account overall distribution costs. So losing sales there to more expensive sales channels, or even to travel agents, or in worst case to the competition, can all be the result of not offering the right set of payment options in any country or region. And like Mo was saying in his examples, don't forget that in quite a number of countries, regular credit cards are actually considered the alternative, and local payment options have the biggest payment market share. In that example, think about China, WeChat, Alipay, China UnionPay, but even in my own home country, like the Netherlands, it's ideal, which in B2C payments is leading the way. So you really should know as an airline how the payment culture is, and make use of the knowledge in your organization. If you have sales offices across the world, ask them about their experience. Ask them and investigate how, let's say, the flag carrier, what are they offering on their home website, and try to be on par or match that. And if they are not that ambitious, the local carrier, you might want to investigate what a large local retailer is offering, and try to put that on your website as well, of course, if that fits in your booking and payment process, obviously.
Mike, if I may
Martin,
just add on to this a little
sorry,
bit.
go on, please do.
I think what Martin's saying is very, very, very important, because traditionally a lot of businesses do not analyze their payment flows and payment economics. And I think we're going to be touching on costs of payment processing a bit later. And I think this is very, very important, because card costs, card processing costs, or MDR, or interchange as we know it, is not the cheapest in the market. And as regulators get involved trying to sit down and facilitate ACH-like payments or direct debit payments in the form of a QR or wallet, the switching cost is actually cheaper to use those instead. So one of the things that we do is, once we understand this, we actually try and get the customers not to use a card if they can, because it's actually cheaper for us. If you notice, the price of the ticket doesn't change, but the cost to us does, right? So it goes straight to the bottom line in terms of operating costs.
Fantastic insight, Mo. Thank you for that. And you're quite right. We're going to come on to the huge costs absorbed by airlines when it comes to payments in a moment. There's something Martin mentioned, just to want to expand on ever so slightly, and that was in your home market, Martin, Ideal. Account to account, open banking adoption, possibly lack of support from GDS systems for this. Hugely popular, of course, Ideal in the Netherlands, popular for KLM passengers as well. What can the industry learn from this, from implementing account to account open banking and the adoption of this, and how we go about supporting airlines with that local adoption of other payment methods?
Yeah. Again, very important is there to understand that the way people want to pay differs in any country. Like, let's say in Holland and in Germany, we are very much used to pay from our own bank account. In the UK, it's much more by card, being credit card or debit card. In the US, it's credit card. So you should take that into account, and also you as an airline or as a merchant should consider or should understand that your preferred method of payment, for instance, based upon cost and fraud, is not the preferred payment option of
for the customer.
Exactly.
Yeah, as Mo touched upon, indeed.
So you have to find a balance there, and that's the famous carrot or stick. If you're talking about credit cards, one could think of surcharging, if that is allowed according A, your distribution policy, and B, the legislation of a country. In that case, much more, let's say, the carrot approach is I like, for instance, give a promotion if somebody is paying with your preferred payment option, like frequent flyer miles, or give them a cup of coffee at the airport. Be creative. Maybe give a discount on some auxiliaries, because again, and if you have the right data as airline, and data is very important in that respect, you obviously know how much money, bottom line, you can save if somebody pays with an A2A payment compared to, let's say, a very expensive credit card payment if there is a family of 4. Now, then you know that part of that savings you can kind of use to stimulate that payment behavior. And there are many tricks out there. Also, the sequence of payment is very important. What we see often with retailers, and I think it's smart, but that's marketing. Put next to your preferred payment option most used, for instance. Now that drives conversion and habit as well. I would say.
Now I would agree. Sorry, I was just going to add something there, Martin. I think one of the important things the airline need to understand is that when you distill what the airline does, they're still selling tickets. And what they need to compare themselves with out there is every other retail player that employs all these tactics, because the airlines have a habit of just doing it their own way, because they've done it for a very long time. And in the past, the airline did not follow any market trends whatsoever. They just follow the travel trends, and then the tickets will be sold. But right now, there is a need for them because now travel is a luxury. People don't travel just for fun anymore, especially after COVID. The value proposition needs to be really, really strong. It forces the airline now to think very, very seriously, almost like an Amazon, in terms of making people buy that ticket and make that trip. So as they shift, they have to shift everything else as well.
That's fantastic and great insight again. And I think you've just touched upon something there in terms of the airlines having to shift from the way they would traditionally sell tickets to understanding more about, as you say, other markets, other verticals, retail space as well. And it's as if we've almost got our heads together before this webinar and thought about it, because you've given me a nice segue again, guys, and that is into the observability around the data and understanding that data in order to present to your customers what is most suitable for them. So typically in payments, as we know, customer and transaction data, it can often be fragmented across different channels and different PSPs, especially in the airlines. And this presents difficulties for airlines who want to optimize their payments in order to enhance the customer experience, as you mentioned, Mo, and to reduce the costs, as you've also mentioned. So it makes it more important than ever that airlines have, I guess, a unified view of their payment transactions to be able to drive these decisions, to try and keep costs down, no matter the channel or the partner involved. So I guess really before we can even think about strategies to improve auth rates, it's crucial that we measure and stay on top of the payment data that drives those strategies. I'm going to put a poll up for our viewers and also a slide in a moment. But Mo, how do you measure and observe payment data today? And what are the critical components that you're focusing on?
Well, that's a very significant pain point. I mean, when we first started, that screen was actually lit. The only way for us to do that is, and this is, I think, to Martin's point, there's always a disjoint between what the business want to see and what payment sees. To the business, the leakages to the business is actually the conversion flow between the steps of the sales. And the more you leak along the pipe, the less money you collect at the bottom. And that the only way I found a way to sit down and link the business view and the operational views to sit down and attribute that leakage to authorization failures or step failures for completion. But Mike, to your point, you need to figure out what are your milestones in your customer journey and whether or not those milestones are actually how I would relate to the business in AirAsia is the fact that they need to see the front of the business, the front office as a pipe, and that pipe's actually linked with joints. And the weaker the joint, the more it leaks, because what's going to end up on the other side will be less and less revenue. So our job is to work together to sit down and tighten up those leaks across each one of the handoffs or the payment points. Because for us, I think, let's not kid ourselves. To make the payment secure, I think Martin will probably agree, it starts with the initial validation. There's always the risk weighting component, and that's before 3DS2 comes in. That's before you sit down and look at some form of secondary validation that the bank's going to do it. There's at least anywhere between 3 to 5 different layers that the customers don't see that we put through for a payment to be successful, right? And for us to save money and keep us protected, that's almost a mandatory step, right? So as a payment practitioner, we need to control those steps first. We need to understand what the leakages are there and then sit down and work through a better way to sit down and make sure the flow through is much better. It gives us an opportunity to go back to the business and say, I'm not the guy who's blocking your business. I'm actually the guy who says, if we do it a different way, you probably get more right through. Because we really don't want the chargeback and the frauds to come right back to us and bite us in the back. It's always about knowing the funnel. And with technology, it's caused a little more confusion because the tech boys tend to think that their step's actually a payment step just because they're looking at something to be sold or to be bought. But in actual fact, the payment step for us is actually when they click buy and that step goes all the way through to the bank. And even then within our own flows, there's a lot more. So for us to be able to understand cost at each layer and the cost of losing or the leakage is going to be instrumental. Otherwise, there's no way to convert that back in terms of a recovery to revenue.
Yeah, and Mike, can I add something to that?
Please.
Because my experience on KLM is an airline obviously has a ton of data. The data is there. However, in your position as a payment manager, being responsible for payments, it's very difficult to have the right information at the right moment. So to disclose all the information in a way, in a UX way, you want to have it. You want to have it in a kind of dashboard, and that's very complicated, because then you have to develop something yourself in order for you to make the right decision for your payment strategy. And sometimes that's very, very difficult. So it's better to take a step back and look what parties are out there to help you with this information. That could be either your PSPs or your payment orchestration players, or are there any other parties out there who can provide you significant information about your payments? And you should not underestimate it, because otherwise you are driving blindfolded, I would say. I mean, providing the right set of data in, for instance, an authorization or a capture can drive down your costs. So it is essential to know, to measure where your costs are, and then take into account how you can bring those costs down. And that's often due to providing the right information in various steps.
You make a great point as well there, that airlines are generating a huge and tremendous amount of data, but it's having the ability to distill that data, to understand that information.
Exactly.
What does it mean? How can I use this data to increase the performance, to reduce my costs, and to drive that? And I think it's knowing the right questions to ask of your data, and it's knowing where to find that and the presentment of that as well.
One of the things that
Thank you.
one of the things that we also need to remember is when the airlines do this, there's a different model to payments when it comes to a large carrier, for example, and a LCC like us. Because a large carrier usually take the hub and spoke model, centrally processed, high efficiency model, everything centralized. We went there and we ended up bleeding. It just didn't work. For the LCC, centralization incurs other cross-border fees and bank charges that was never ideal. We ended up settling into a distributed model where the technology is centralized, but the acquisition and the monitoring and business is actually operated in satellite functions in some of our markets. Like, for example, AirAsia, even though we're headquartered in KL, we have our hubs in Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, and each one of those are basically their own hubs. So we process there, but the platforms are centrally managed from KL. Versus bringing everything back in one place. Yes, economies of scale would work, but then the cost of moving money later just wasn't working for us, right? So once you see the flows and you agree that that will be the unified flow you want to present to the customer, the rationalization in the back end between the GDSs or the instance between the GDS in your books becomes the final step for you to sort of fine tune as well. There's no one solution, right? And we're starting to realize that as local regulators favor in-country switching and domestic switching, they incentivize the merchants to do so through lower prices or lower costs, right? Even the scheme's cost for domestic MDR is lower than a inter and intra transaction as well. So it forces us to relook at our payment strategy. And to Martin's point, whether or not you want to do it in-house, whether you want to use a partner, whether you want to go hammer a partner to do something else, especially because their market is so special, you need to almost go bespoke. All that has to be thought through as well.
Absolutely. And when you look at the traditional payment system involved, routing card transactions, like you mentioned, when you've got different hubs and you cross-border to potentially select few acquirers, then incurs higher service fees, lower acceptance rates often as well, the necessary and costly modifications to payment providers that are, I guess, sometimes involved in conventional processes to overcome the issue are also removed when you look at trying to understand your data, consolidate, whether that's through multiple PSPs, whether that's through orchestration, whatever the process you look like. And airlines can use a platform to provide hopefully cheaper, a more UX-friendly payment experience as well. So when we think about some of those strategies to improve those auth rates, Martin, how can merchants, how can airlines leverage that data, but also what strategies can they employ to improve their auth rates based on some of the things we've just discussed, and maybe what are some of those benefits of a multi-pronged acquirer strategy or an orchestration, be it routing in-house or externally? What are some of those benefits for airlines?
Yeah. Maybe to substantiate that, Mike, and I hope we still have about 5 minutes. I think
we're getting there.
I think we prepared some slides, and if you can put them up, I think it's easier to explain for the people how that would work in practice. So
here it comes.
What you can see that this is an example of an airline of an.
You're being very kind, Martin. This is a simple diagram.
Try and follow that.
It is Mo. It is. And by the way, if I understand it, it is simple. So there you go. So let me explain a bit. So on the left hand side, you could see the front ends of an airline. That's basically the platforms on which a customer is making a booking or is buying a product of an airline. So those are the customer touch points. And then through the reservation system, the booking is made. And then in this case, this specific airline has their own payment engine. Of course, that's not always the case, but for this airline, it's working with an own payment engine. So what you see left of the dotted line is all in-house, and right of the dotted line is external parties. Now, what you could see with this airline, that they have quite a number of external connections. They have two PSPs. The first PSPs they are using as a gateway to the various acquirers. So what I like with this airline is that they have a multiple acquire strategy, and that's great. And they use the two PSPs, if you look at the blue arrows, to help them out in offering alternative payments as well. But they are still limited on, let's say, the number of acquirers and the number of payment options which can be offered by those two PSPs. And if you're talking about an airline with a large global footprint, they want to offer maybe more payment options. And even, especially post-COVID, they want to increase connectivity. They want to reach out to more acquirers in order to avoid risk or in case of technical issues. So that's why even for such an airline, a step to a payment orchestration player to basically increase connectivity. You see the lines here. This POP is on the place of their current external parties, which can route transactions to other acquirers or to other alternative forms of payment. And if we go one down, Mike, one slide down, if you have that. Yeah. So you saw. Yeah. So you saw in the first instance example, the POP was at the same level as their current providers, but one could also decide maybe at a later stage to put the POP between the payment engine and all other external parties. Of course, that comes with pros and cons, but if one gained experience with the POP and one is looking for a very smooth platform and process, one could put the POP in front of all those external parties. But it comes with pros and cons, and obviously the POP here can also take over part of the capabilities of a payment engine. And if an airline doesn't have a payment engine, it's the POP what can do so.
So Martin, I think based on the diagram, I think I would agree with you. I think the POP number 2 is almost like an orchestration platform. But what's interesting is you're operating on a singular bank in euros only. And in other parts of the world, you may end up having multiple banks because not all banks will carry all currencies, especially if it's a weaker currency that you are using as an operational currency as well. So the diagram gets a bit more complex and just kind of goes up. So you
Of course,
Yeah,
and that depends which acquirers you use and
exactly.
in which currency they can sell. And take into account, Mo, that you probably know that most of the payment orchestration players are not in the money flow. So it depends very much on what you can contractually agree on with the individual providers. But you have a right point. It comes with many aspects. Yes,
of course. There's many ways. The many places.
It certainly does. No, thank you for showing us that, Martin, and talking us through it. It really gives a good understanding and helps us really see how airlines can have greater control over the payment policy, allowing them, I guess, to quickly build custom arrangements of payment methods, acquirers, PSPs, and that seamless checkout experience that we talked about, and ultimately create a smoother system, back-end processing as well, and that's what we want to see. These platforms, of course, can standardize data formats and help with that observability that we were talking about. We are running out of time. I just want to very briefly touch upon something that Mo raised earlier, because it is critical, and it is why payment costs are so high for airlines. I was doing a little bit of research and reading, according to a McKinsey report last year, airlines' payment costs, and this is staggering, globally totaled over $20 billion a year. This amounts to around 3% of airlines' total revenue, and unbelievably, 78% of net profit. So, Mo, why are payment costs for airlines so high? You mentioned credit cards. 70% of transactions are by credit cards, and we understand a lot of the huge cost of credit cards. But talk us through some of the reasons why you see them being so high.
Well, let's put it this way. I think it doesn't matter which airline you look at, cards will be a significant amount of the portfolio. If you take the Asia Pacific region or the ASEAN region, the domestic MDRs, that the cost will be anywhere between 0.5 to 1%. But then when you start looking at cross-border, you float around 1.8 to 2%. When you start fully loading everything else on top, it does hover around the 3% overall cost construct anyway. The issue we have in this part of the world, and maybe this is more for this part, because it is a somewhat emerging market, cost is so high because no two markets have a similar MDR cost base for us. We have about 4 acquirers in every market we operate, and we operate in 15 of them. So you can imagine, I think, Martin will appreciate the fact that it gives you a different kind of white hair headache that you're going to come from. And each acquiring contract will never be exactly the same in terms of a cost base, even if it's the same market, right? So in KL alone, I've got one acquirer giving me a really cheap piece to a relatively high piece, but another acquirer who doesn't trust me so much, and they probably just try and scalp me with something percent, 2-point-something%, because they think they can get away with it, right? And that's why we orchestrate. But what goes into that 3% that a lot of reports don't include is actually the cost of funds, the cost of treasury, the multi-currency costs, the cash management cost, and the operational costs you need in terms of people when it comes to a large operations. And COVID, we learned this the hard way, when you have 750,000 refunds to put in. It's when you fully load it, it's going to hit you, right? That's why automation's key, visibility of the transaction is key, online real-time activation of refunds where possible is also a quick way for us to sit down and save.
And Mike, if I may add just one thing, because I know we're running out of time.
Please do.
Yeah, what I try to do during my time at KLM, payments is often seen, and I understand that, as a cost center. But I try to move the payments department from a cost center to a profit center.
Nice.
One of the things we did there, and that has to do with cost as well. Obviously, credit card costs are visible, and everybody understands that and sees that. But often overseen is the cost, especially if you fly to many destinations and have to handle a lot of currencies. Often the cost of FX, Forex, is overseen. because it's fake, it's not clear, it's somewhere there in the process. You don't even know maybe how it is stipulated in your acquiring contract, or how the accounting works with that. So I want to say, A, those are very important costs which you have to make visible, and B, they can also, as an airline, they can also use to your benefit. When we started to implement MCP or DCC, we saw revenues coming in, and we saw the conversion also increasing. So what I want to say, it's if you are responsible for payments in your airline, it's not just the cost, but also look at revenues and try to work with partners which allow you to disclose to other parties which can create your revenue. And also there, I think that orchestration can play a very important role.
Great. Mike, I know, like I said, running out of time, but this
Go.
topic is like hot, right? One thing we did to improve our auth rates is not to use the scheme rails. So what we did was we implemented our own stored value wallet, where the consumer experience of topping up the wallet is very different from buying a ticket. So when they fail at top up, it doesn't ding us in terms of the experience of buying the ticket sucked because payment failed there. But the moment the money is in the ecosystem, it's almost like a casino type play, where it's a left-right pocket kind of a GL entry, and it's almost instantaneous, right? With an in-house wallet, we were able to deliver to the customer almost a cash-like experience, because they don't wait for anything. It's immediate. And when we refund to them, it's immediate as well, right? So, and when you actually do it that way, your auth rates go up because it's always going to be approved. Money's already in, it's prepaid anyhow. And the perception of you're doing the right thing, you're not sitting on my money, it works. And when we actually already have the liquidity in the wallet, we were able then to sit down and transfer that for in-flight payments. Because in-flight payments now doesn't need to be online real time. So not all of our aircraft actually have Wi-Fi, and that's another cost base that we don't have to manage, right? So for us, and that was something I wanted to share, the quickest way to sit down and save money and improve the auth rates is not to use other people's stuff.
That's a fantastic real life example. And you've both given that in terms of looking at the legacy way of transactions, of payments being a cost center. Let's look at it as a revenue generating opportunity and a way of engaging directly with the customers and giving them a better experience as well. And as you both rightly pointed out, payments can be seen, it should be seen as a revenue stream rather than a cost associated. Fantastic insights. We are running out of time, and I think you said at the start, Mo, we could probably talk all day for me and Martin, all night for you, because there is so much to cover when it comes to airlines and when it comes to discussing payments for airlines. It does mean we have sadly run out of time for any questions. I have gathered some up. What we are going to do is share this webinar after the event and link to it, including some of the answers to the questions you guys have posted to our panelists, because it's really important that your direct questions are answered and you're given some feedback as to what the experts are doing. I have posted a link into the chat. This link will take you directly to the sign up opportunity to be able to use an optimization tool, an observability tool to understand your payments. This is something that I'd encourage anybody that's listening to do, to have a play around with, to have a free trial, to be able to gain more information and insight into the performance of your payments, into the performance of all of that data, and how you can drive your auth rates and benefit from that. Mo, Martin, I want to thank you both from the bottom of my heart for your time. You've been fantastic panelists. Your insight is incredibly valuable, and I'm sure everybody has taken a lot away from that. So, gents, thank you both for everything that you've given to us.
Thank
You're
you for
very
having us.
welcome. You're very welcome, Mike. And if I may add one final thing, maybe it's interesting because, like Mo is saying, and like we have been seeing here, maybe we could go for a sequel, a part 2 in Q1 next year, and discuss many more things.
Yes, yes.
I'll hold you both to that.
I'm game. I'm game.
Yes, there you go.
Thank you,
And then I
gents.
promise to
Enjoy
be
the
in
rest.
time.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and for everybody that's dialed in, thank you all for dialing in. We obviously wouldn't be doing these things without you guys being here and taking part. And we will send over the recording, so please look out for that. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.